You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 576.
Hello and welcome back to the Outdoors Station. I'm your host, Bob Cartwright, and I've been producing outdoors-based podcasts to educate, inform and inspire listeners to enjoy a positive outdoors lifestyle since 2005. Today's interview certainly falls under the inspirational category, as I talked with adventure athlete and all-round tough girl Katy Parrott about her approach to the outdoors, experiences on the TV show Hell Week, mental challenges and outdoor life since then. But before we get into the conversation, I need to ask for your help. I've recently found that my reach via social media and subsequently the downloads appear to be throttled back by the dreaded algorithms. It's just not reaching who it used to. I'm finding also that I'm not seeing all the updates from people I follow either, so I know it isn't just me. So if you do enjoy my content, please would you make sure that you follow me on the social media, share it wherever you can via your social network, but more importantly, could you join my newsletter over on theoutdoorstation.co.uk, as I know it's the only way I have a reliable method to reach you out of the control of social media to let you know about the latest releases. All the links are on my socials via the link tree, and it'll only take a few seconds to complete, so I would be very grateful. Adventurous and endurance athlete Katy Parrott burst onto our screens a few years ago as a top finisher on the very popular TV show Special Forces Ultimate Hell Week, proving that you don't have to be a muscle mountain to overcome a week of mental and physical challenges. As a result of this show, she joined the Army Reservists, which in turn has opened up a world of adventure, tackling various ultramarathons, an Ironman, a 185-kilometre Arctic Ultra, fast-packing the GR20, a 7-month tour in Afghanistan, and a few serious mountains thrown in for good measure. Along the way, she caught the eye of Fast and Light brand Montaigne to become one of their impressive sponsored athletes. So I was delighted to be given the chance to meet up with Katy to find out more about her backstory, where her resilience came from, and her approach to life in general. I started off by asking her how she might describe herself if you were to meet her for the very first time.
I would introduce myself as slightly feral, general lover of the outdoors, and someone who just loves running really far for fun.
Okay, and of the three of those, the one that sounds the most interesting is the feral part, I think. So tell me a bit about your feral history. How did that start?
Probably started from a young age. Growing up, I was a scout, which was quite unusual for a girl. And that involved skinning rabbits, making rabbit stew, just being left out in the wilderness, being slightly feral. And that's kind of how I've continued the rest of my life, really. Just I feel most comfortable when I'm outdoors and in the elements, rather than sort of being cozy at home.
So whereabouts did you grow up then? Was it in the UK or outside the UK?
Yeah, I grew up in Bristol.
Bristol.
Yeah, Bristol in the southwest. I don't think I have much of an accent though, do I?
No, you don't, but I'm surprised there's still skinny rabbits in Bristol, because I thought they'd moved on a bit now, and with electricity and gas and all that sort of stuff.
Well, you know, when you get hungry, you've got to do what you've got to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you started in Bristol, and I understand that through your school you ended up going to a college or university to study film studies or film camera work. Was that sort of an extension of the creative part of your nature? Because obviously you are known, if people look on your social, for your artwork and your paintings as well.
So I originally went to university to do sports science, and I think because I had no idea what I wanted to do when I left school and applying for uni, I kind of panicked and went, I like sport, so I'll do sports science. And after a bit of reflection, I then changed my degree to biology at the University of Bath, and then took a year out and then went back to Bristol to do my master's in wildlife filmmaking. So as you said, that way was a nice way to sort of combine my biology degree with my creative side.
And did you enjoy the filmmaking? Is it something that you've kept going, or is it something you went through at a certain stage of your life, do you think?
I absolutely loved my master's. It was a phenomenal year. I mean, my dissertation or thesis was to go out and make a short film and edit it, produce it, film it, the whole lot. So, I mean, what a project to do as a master's. So I went out to Bulgaria and did a 400k trek along a mountain range to sort of have a look out for wildlife. So it was a bit of adventure, a bit of wildlife. Absolutely adored it. I did go into the TV industry for about 3 or 4 years afterwards. And yeah, had a great time. So I worked with Monty Halls quite a lot. He's like my TV dad. But then I had the opportunity to deploy out to Afghanistan in 2019. So I took that opportunity. So kind of stepped away from the TV world.
Okay, well, let's just backtrack a little bit, because there's an awful lot.
There's a lot there.
You've just condensed down. That's 10 of my questions all shot in the air. Right. Well, let's start. First of all, I think people who may be aware of you will be aware of the Hell Week, the Special Forces Hell Week, which is where you sort of leapt onto our screens as a, well, personality, if that's the right word to use, a name that we start to recognise. And I know from your previous history, you're easily led, and somebody suggested you should try this. And so you tottered off and had a go at that. In all fairness, I haven't seen it, but I have heard many, many stories, and it sounded like it was a phenomenal challenge. So let's just talk a little bit about the Hell Week. For the people that haven't seen it, well, possibly a bit like myself, but for the people that haven't seen it or heard about it, what is the ultimate Hell Week?
So it's basically a group of civilians. We got flown out to South Africa, and every 48 hours was a different country, special forces. So they basically had us for 2 days straight each and just thrashed us, did some of their sort of more specific special forces training that they do with their recruits over in their sort of country. So we had the South Africans, the Polish, the American Green Berets, the South Korean kind of Navy SEALs equivalent, French urban war crime special forces, and then finished with the Australian SAS. And we had no idea what was coming. Every single minute, every hour was a complete surprise. So I kind of entered into it having no idea what I was letting myself in for, quite naively probably. But I think that probably helped, because I had no expectations of how I would do, of how I would cope with it physically or mentally. I kind of just took every hour in my stride and just wanted to get through the next hour and the next hour, and just keep going if I could.
And that actually is the area I'd like to just spend a few minutes talking about, if I may. Your childhood and your education, was it state system or was it public system you went to?
I went to a public school in Bristol, an all-girls school.
Right. All girls, oh my word, even worse. even more trouble. Anyway, I went to public school as well. And a lot of people don't know this, but I also was in the services right when I came out of school. And I noticed there was a significant difference between the attitude and approach to things which came out of the blue. So in that particular case, that scenario that you've just described, did you find that the other contestants that may have had a different background to yourself had different apprehensions about the challenges that were set to them as they approached them?
It's difficult to tell what people were saying sort of for camera or was actually genuine. So a few people did approach it with, I'm going to win, I've done this, I've done that, I'm super strong, and a slightly macho approach. but again, you never quite know what's for show for camera. But I didn't really take much notice of how other people were approaching it, because I knew that it was my own journey. And if you kind of let the way that other people were doing it sort of get in my head, I think that might have thrown me off course a little bit. So I just focused on myself and getting through, as I said, each minute, every hour at a time. And I remember getting asked in one of the interviews, "Are you going to win this?" And I said, probably not. I mean, I have no idea. I honestly have no idea how I'm going to do. But my main objective is just not to give up. So that's how I went into it. Just don't give up. That was sort of my mantra.
Yeah. Were the cameras on you literally 24/7 then? You didn't have chance for a little quiet conversation, or conversation at least away from cameras?
There were cameras everywhere. We barely got any downtime.
Right.
I did a talk yesterday and I got asked that same question, like, was it actually as hardcore as it looked? And I was like, it was worse than it looked. So much worse than it looked on camera. We were mic'd constantly. So even if we were having chats just in our dorm with the fellow contestants, they would capture everything. So there was no escape.
Right. No downtime at all. That's interesting. I think people don't realise that to get 2 minutes worth of really interesting footage, you have to spend 24 hours ploughing or recording or whatever it may be. So, of course, those events that look like they've only taken 5 or 6 minutes on TV actually probably were quite a few hours, such as you're being shut in a coffin for a bit of peace and quiet. I thought that was quite interesting, really.
Yeah, I think I was in there for 6 hours in total. But as you said, on the telly, it probably shows for 6 or 7 minutes. But reality was I was in there for 6 hours. I got fished out because I had mild hypothermia in the end. And I guess you don't feel the full extent of that when you just watch a short clip. But I felt every minute of being in there. But as you said, it was a nice chance just to have a little nap, bit of peace and quiet away from everyone.
And I've heard you speak about it in a couple of other interviews before, and I recognised in what you were saying that actually a lot of people would have perhaps had a bit of a meltdown being trapped in something like that. And that was what led me to my earlier question about sort of your attitude that you've gained from your education and your background, that you just went, okay, well, they're not going to kill me, so let's just see how long I last, which, a lot of people probably would be well outside their comfort zone.
It's unnatural to get locked in a box, isn't it? It's probably a lot of people's worst nightmares. But as you said, I think actually going to an all-girls school, because it was never boys sports or girls sports or boys subjects, girls subjects. I never had that. It was just everything was an opportunity, and I never felt like there was restrictions on what I could or couldn't do. So that's probably helped sort of shape who I am today, because it was just cool. I can play football, I'll do that. I can play rugby, I'll do that. It wasn't sort of one or the other. So that probably has made quite a big difference. I never felt like I couldn't do something. Yeah,
I think that it's the sort of environment where you are encouraged to give everything a go, aren't you, really, which is why people choose to have that sort of education, I guess. So once again, somebody made a suggestion as you came out of the programme. I understand that perhaps you've ever thought about joining the army, and you thought, well, that's a good idea. So tell me about what was it like going into the recruitment office and explaining what you've just done.
I actually didn't really tell anyone about it. I kept it quite quiet, and actually, when I was on my basic training at Pirbright, the adverts had just started to come on telly, and I hadn't told any of the training team that I'd been on this show. I kind of just wanted to be the grey person and just get through training. And I remember one day our like troop sergeant burst into the room and was like, "Parrott, where are you?" I was like, oh no. She's like, "I've just seen your face on telly. I knew there was something weird about you." So then it all came out then. But I think I purposely just wanted to keep a bit of a a low profile whilst going through training, so that I
Yeah.
didn't, get picked on or
Yeah. Get a target on
it's
your back.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've done this before. So right, I'd do it 10 times. Yeah, I can understand
Yeah.
that. But it was received well though with your fellow trainees.
Yeah, it definitely was. I think just a lot of questions, and most people really supportive and just really enjoyed watching it, and probably giving me a bit of grief and a bit of banter as well.
And so, which area that you moved into, and sort of what does your role entail on that side, on the military side now?
So I am with Six Rifles as a combat medic. So I'm attached to sort of that infantry unit to look after them and sort of be that first line of response, I suppose. And they're a brilliant unit. They've been super supportive, and I've had, the past 8 years, so many amazing experiences going to some weird and wonderful countries, such as Armenia, Georgia, did a 7-month tour in Afghanistan, been to Norway to do Arctic survival training, and spent 2 months in Pakistan doing high altitude climbing as well. So many opportunities. I feel
Yeah.
very, very grateful for all of those.
So, as an army reservist, just explain if you would for listeners. Do you dictate you're available for a certain amount of time, or do they dictate that they need you, X number of days a month type of thing? How does it work?
So it's generally one evening a week. So mine's on a Tuesday evening, is like your drill or training night for 2 hours. There's generally one weekend a month, and then you have to do a 2-week course every year to sort of qualify you to make sure that you're current and competent in skills. And you have to pass all the tests every year, such as shooting, navigation, fitness. And so it's not, to do the bare minimum, it's not a huge commitment. But then you can, if there are deployments, you can sort of put your name forward to do that, which is what I did for Afghanistan. I volunteered my name, and I think about 100 from my unit put our names forward, and then 5 of us went out on deployment.
And how did you find that as an environment, an environment to sort of work in, but also live in, really, the actual landscape?
It was a big learning experience. I'm glad I got the opportunity to actually go out and use all the skills and the training that I'd learnt, because not many reservists sort of get the chance to do that. So actually getting to be a combat medic for 7 months was amazing, and I learnt a huge amount. And camp life just became normal in a way, I think, because I went in 2019, so things like Wi-Fi were really like easily available, and so I could speak to my family and friends back at home. And I just got into a routine where I'd work, do some fizz, eat, sleep, just got into a routine, and it became kind of normal life in a way. And coming back was actually quite difficult, because I got so used to being surrounded by people all the time. Then coming back to sort of a quiet house, especially into COVID, was quite a transition, I think.
And talking about that transition, that you started another little sideline type career during the lockdown, which again, it's unlike you to go off on a tangent, but tell us about how that started.
Yes, my mini lockdown career. I think a lot of people don't actually know this. And when I said, oh, by the way, I paint, I'm an artist, quite a few people were shocked. Like, you can't sit still. How can you paint? So I did art A level and absolutely loved it. Got an A star. So it was one of my favorite things to do. I would just live up in the art block in sixth form. And then when COVID hit and kind of everything just came to a halt, so what can I do to pass the time? And I just put a post up on all my socials of an old painting that I'd done. It's like, does anyone fancy a painting? Fairly cheap. And then it just completely took off. I had 6 months pretty much back-to-back commissions of landscapes, pet portraits, a few sort of adventure portraits, I'd say. So people in landscapes doing cool things. And it was completely unexpected and absolutely adored it. And I've just picked up all of my art materials from my mum's back in Bristol to start painting again, actually. So I've got a commission, which I've started drawing today. So it's going to be nice to get back into that. And it's like the one thing, painting and eating, that can make me sit still.
make you happy. I mean, do you find, sort of looking at this in a sort of a Zen point of view, do you find that doing something like painting, where you have to focus and you get into the zone when you're doing a craft, is that comparable to when you get into the zone and you're out plodding and you're running, doing a long distance, and you sort of have to get into sort of a mindset? Do you find there's a comparison between the two? Similarity?
I've not thought of it like that before, but I think you're probably right. It's when you're in that zone where hours can go by and you don't really realize. So I definitely have that with painting. I definitely have that at the start of some long runs, perhaps not at the end where you are literally counting down the minutes and hours. But yeah, like going out for sort of nice 20, 30K training runs, I do get into that zone where you're just plodding and watching the world go by and just get into that kind of happy headspace, I suppose.
The home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for lovers of the great outdoors everywhere.
It's all about getting out and having much more fun.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I understand that you've done some ultra marathons and you've done the Arctic one. Is it the Montane Arctic?
Yes, yeah.
What has been your favourite? What have you enjoyed the most as regards the adventure itself of doing a long distance like that?
The Montane Lapland Arctic Ultra is definitely up there with one of my highlights. It was a really important race for me for a few reasons. So I had quite a severe injury a year before and had a whole knee reconstruction and had a whole year of rehab, which was a tough old year, bit of a roller coaster. So the Arctic Ultra was a bit of a comeback event for me to test both my physical and mental resilience and just see, can I still do these mad ultras, even though my left knee will never be the same and has got some screws and some bits missing and bits in other places. And so it was, I guess, a way, it sounds cheesy, but I wanted to kind of find me again in that race. And so just heading out there into an amazing landscape, into quite literally the unknown, because I'd never done an Arctic Ultra before. Again, I had no expectations of myself, just wanted to give it a go and get round in one piece, getting to see the Northern Lights and really feeling humbled by that environment. It was just, an amazing experience, and getting to meet amazing people along the way as well. It's always part of why I do these events. Everyone's got really cool stories and super inspirational. So it was an amazing event. 185K of coldness.
Well, there is an excellent video on it. Obviously, I think it's on the Montane site. It might be on your website as well, actually.
Yeah, it's on Montane on YouTube as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was, I could feel watching it that the relief when you finished was possibly not so much about the distance, but it was about your leg.
Yeah, I had no idea if it would. I think I only signed up for it about 6 weeks befove. So
that's a long time for you.
That's true. So yeah, I mean, perhaps not the amount of prep that I would have liked, but I went out sort of dragging a tire around the local park, and I went on some hilly trail runs, but I hadn't tested my knee to anywhere near that extent. So I honestly had no idea how I would do, and it was a bit of a risk, but just getting to that finish line and like, oh, it feels strong, it feels good, maybe just slightly cold because there's screws in there, but apart from that, it was a relief to know actually I'm back in the game.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. So looking at the Arctic Ultra, which is quite an interesting event in itself, you were pulling a pulk and you had your own gear. I couldn't quite work out from the video, were you sort of put up in huts, or were you bivvying, or do you have to camp completely? What was the sort of rules that you have to adhere to for that event?
So because it was a continuous race, it was up to you when you stopped, if you stopped at all. So some people just went through the whole thing, or some people only stopped for, a couple of hours at a time. And we had to either have a bivvy or a tent so that we could stop sort of in the middle of nowhere if we needed to or wanted to. So I stayed in a hut that I came across on the first night for a few hours. And then second night I bivvied out. And then the third night I found a really dodgy looking 3-sided shelter in the middle of the woods. It was quite dodgy, and just got my head down for a couple of hours there. So it was completely up to the athletes themselves of what their strategy was going to be.
What's your mindset though when you stop something like that and you say, okay, I'll have 2 or 3 hours? Is it a bit like when you go on holiday and you're waiting to wake up again to get to the plane in time or whatever? Do you have that nervousness that you're going to oversleep?
I set alarms. I set multiple alarms to make sure that I didn't oversleep, because I probably could have quite easily just slept for 12 hours straight.
Right. So
multiple alarms. But I think I knew that I needed it. So there's always part of me that's like, oh, well, if I stop, people are going to get further ahead. But actually, I wasn't there to race other people. I was there for my own personal race. So I kind of blocked all those thoughts out of my mind and went, no, Katie, you want to, and you need to get to the finish in one piece, and stopping for 4 hours to get some rest is going to help you do that.
Right.
So that's how I kind of framed it in my head as like, this is the right decision for me. For other people, it will be very different, but I didn't want to push myself too far and then not finish.
Well, no, under the circumstances, I think you made the right choices, didn't you, from that point of view? It was getting to the end and testing yourself ready for the next thing. When you say you bivvied out, that can mean a lot of different things to different people. So just describe what that entailed from your point of view.
So had to have quite a good setup to bivvy out in the Arctic. So I had a foam sort of fold out mat that would go down first. I then had quite a large, bright red bivvy bag that made me look like a little worm in the snow. Then inside my bivvy bag, I had a down inflatable mat, because when you're sleeping on the snow, a lot of your heat will just be lost down through the floor. So having that double layer sort of mat made a massive difference, and it was quite a thick sleeping mat and that I had to inflate. So it was like sleeping on a lilo. It was very comfortable. And then I also had a -40 sleeping bag. So both the mat and the sleeping bag were inside the bivvy bag. And then I would just sleep out in the open with stars above me.
Wow.
It was quite an experience.
Yeah. Well, once you tucked in all that, like, the last thing you want to do is crawl out of it again in 2 hours' time. Well, surely.
That's true.
That must have been a heck of a big bivvy bag, though, to be able to fit a down mat in and a Arctic bag.
Yeah, it was quite. I got the it was from Alp Kit, and I got the extra large one so that I could fit everything in, and it was perfect.
The hunker.
It worked really
excellent.
well.
Oh, excellent, fantastic. So you've achieved all these different events, and what is the strongest part, do you think, for people that want to put themselves outside their comfort zone? The visualization of what they're trying to achieve, the actual physical getting ready for it, the readiness, getting their body ready, having the right equipment. What area is the most important, do you feel, when people want to put themselves through something which is out of their comfort zone?
That's a really good question. And I think ultimately it's a combination of all of those things. But I think one thing that makes a massive difference to me is having an amazing support network around. Just having people that are your cheerleaders. And when you say, oh, I'm going to go off and do an Arctic Ultra a year after a knee reconstruction, go, do you know what? Fair play. Like, I reckon you can do that, rather than people going, oh no, you can't do that. That's a bit silly. Just having people in your corner that are going to support you makes all the difference. You know, you can have all the right kit and prep in the world, but if you have negative people around you, that can sort of dampen everything. So I'd say surrounding yourself with like-minded, supportive people that are going to pick you up and champion you is one of the most important things.
So not surrounding yourself with people that perhaps judge you by their own standards.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and this is something I talk about a lot, is that challenge is so relative. So for one person, it could be joining a trail running club and doing a couch to 5K is like the biggest step and the biggest challenge outside of their comfort zone. Whereas someone else, it could be running 200 miles straight with no sleep. So it's so different, and comparing yourself to other people constantly is I don't think is particularly healthy. I think if it's done in a healthy way where it inspires you to achieve what you want, that's great. But when you look at someone and go, oh, they're doing that, I'm not good enough, that's where it becomes dangerous. So just championing people for their challenges, their adventures, because everyone's different and challenge is very different for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, I was in your particular case, and sort of looking over your adventurous CV, as it were, going back 8-9 years, shall we say, and prior to that, possibly with school life as well. Do you think that the extent of the Hell Week and what they put you through set you up in such a way that since then nothing has really been that much of a surprise to test your own character?
Yeah, massively. I think the amazing thing that Hell Week did was it revealed a physical and mental resilience that I didn't know I had. So now moving forwards, I know that I have that to tap into, and I'm a lot more comfortable with being uncomfortable and sort of recognizing my limits and how far I can push them. So I think it did equip me for everything I've done sort of since then, because I thought, oh, I managed to get through that all right. What else can I do? How much further can I push myself? And I think the first ultra I did was probably the hardest one I've done, because it was kind of stepping into the unknown again and not knowing how it was going to feel after 12 hours of running, because I hadn't done that before. But now I've built up kind of, it's not just the physical training, it's the mental training as well, and understanding your own emotions and how to combat them when you're having negative thoughts or these sort of doubts coming in. I now have sort of the right techniques to push them aside and just keep on going. Whereas that first ultra, I didn't have any of those tools. I had nothing in my toolbox to pull out, and it was just hours and kilometers of pain and agony.
So tell me about the 8,000 meter peak that you climbed. Unfortunately, I know it's associated with a bit of a tragedy as well, but how did that unfold?
So that was a tri-service expedition out to Pakistan to climb Broad Peak. So that's the 12th highest mountain in the world. I didn't summit because we sadly lost one of our team members on summit day. So some of us were sort of in the process on various stages up the mountain for our summit bids. And so Gordo, he fell off the summit ridge and sadly lost his life, which I think it's probably changed me quite a lot as a person, and it will always be a milestone, like a massive event that's happened in my life. Appreciate things a lot more. And unfortunately, it's one of those risks that come with climbing 8,000 meter peaks. They're not environments to be sniffed at. It's a dangerous environment. As phenomenal as it is being up there and being in that landscape, it is a dangerous environment. And yeah, it was tough, really tough to kind of deal with that. And
were you free climbing as individuals, or were you roped together and something happened?
So there's fixed lines on that particular mountain on Broad Peak. So a team come in and fix these ropes. So I guess it's kind of like Go Ape in a way. If you can imagine, you clip onto the rope and then you climb up. And I mean, I wasn't with Gordo at the time, so no one really knows what happens, but we would typically climb in sort of threes or pairs, just so we had sort of a buddy. And yeah, that particular day I was further down the mountain, and with one of my other climbing buddies, Steve-O, we're kind of waiting in a tent to then start climbing up higher. So yeah, it's not kind of like rock climbing in a sense. There were some scrambly sections and some sort of frozen rocky bits which were a little bit sketchy. But yeah, quite a big climb up to the Col, and then sort of people head up onto the summit ridge, which is quite a long ridge onto the summit. So it's a long summit day, but I didn't get that far. Gordo was it was amazing. He was kind of like my expedition dad out there, and a bit of a mountain mentor. So up on the mountain, we would generally kind of stick together. So yeah, he had a big impact on me up there, and he'd done quite a few Ironmans. So we spoke about them a lot whilst hunkered down in a tent at 6,500 meters. And that's why I did mine last year. So that was in his memory. So went out to Tallinn to do the Ironman sort of for him, having that little kick up the butt to be like, right, this is for you, Gordo.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. Out of curiosity, do you have many young girls approach you at all for ideas, information, inspiration? Are you finding yourself to be an inspirational figure for the females, the young females of this world?
I've had quite a few messages about how to get into trail running or ultra running, and also quite a few about the reserves, actually, of young women that are interested to start a reserve career, and any hints and tips that I can give them. So I get a few messages, but it's not just young women. I find that I guess I hope anyone would be able to relate to me. Doesn't matter gender or age. I think we can all learn from each other.
So you're leading this life as a well-known adventurous, doing a whole variety of things that you apparently can't say no to when people suggest more and more outrageous things. But I think probably most people that admire you and aspire to do something like you're doing would wonder how you can afford to do this type of thing. How do the finances work? You're a sponsored montane athlete. That's obviously well known. And you mentioned that the army have been very supportive in some of these big expeditions, but obviously day-to-day life costs money. And if you don't mind me asking, how do you balance the finances?
That's a good question. So I'm obviously lucky to have the support of Montaigne. So they support a lot of stuff, a lot of my trips. I do quite a lot of keynote talks, so they help fund the trips as well, and then do some leadership and development coaching, and then also the army. So it's various forms of employment sort of help fund everything. And then, I mean, some of the other adventures I go on that I fund myself, they're not wildly expensive, so I can do them kind of on a shoestring and do them fairly cheap. And I guess I don't have what you'd call typical holidays. if I'm going to go away somewhere, I would normally go there for a race or to explore some mountains or do a trail. So I guess, I whatever money I would normally put into a holiday sort of goes into adventures instead. And then also painting. So variety of ways, very multifaceted.
I think people will assume once you get known in the same way that you are, that actually you're living quite a comfortable existence when you go out to do these events. But actual fact, it's reassuring to hear that you're like the rest of us and you're just managing to get there and doing it as cheaply or as cost effectively as possible.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not a lifestyle that lends itself to luxury, let's say. I've got, mortgage to pay on my own and a small cat to feed. I don't have many luxuries in my life, and my trips are sort of rugged and there's no 5-star hotels here.
and raw. That's what we love about you. They're rugged and raw. Okay, so let's just talk about gear for a bit, because we're always a bit of a gear anorak at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. Now, I realise, obviously, we can ignore all Montaigne stuff because you're a Montaigne-sponsored athlete. However, what was the last thing that you purchased and that you keep in your rucksack?
So in Pakistan, we used solar panels to charge everything. So little fold-out panels that weigh nothing, and we could just attach onto the top of our bags to charge power banks, phones, head torches, everything. Because obviously we're out in the middle of the glacier for 2 months. There's no plugs or pylons there. So I think little solar panels were super useful. But again, in the UK, they're probably not that useful, as we don't get a huge amount of sun. But if you're going somewhere that you know you're going to get guaranteed sun, I found they were super simple and super useful.
Okay, well, I think we've taken enough of your time, Katy. It's been lovely to speak to you, and I hope you don't mind with some of the things we've touched on. That's been really good. Thank you. But I do have a final question. Of all the things I could have asked you about resilience, adventures, long distance running, etc., what should I have asked you?
Maybe a lot of people ask me what goes through your mind when you're in those races and you feel like you want to quit. How do you stop yourself from doing that? Because quite often the mind gives up before the body. And I've learned that I do quite a lot of visualization. So I always tell myself it's going to end at some point. And I visualize how amazing it's going to feel when I do finish. And that sense of achievement that you get is, you can't replicate that. And then I also visualize how rubbish it will feel if I quit and how disappointed I'd be in myself. So feeling those emotions helps sort of keep me on the right track heading forward.
My thanks to Katy for taking the time to share her thoughts and a glimpse of what is involved with living an adventurous lifestyle. You can find out more about her achievements on her website, katyparrott.com, or on montaigne.com. And she's also part of the speakersfromtheedge.com. So if you would like Katy to talk to your group, school, or gathering, you can find out more there. Please drop me a note if you've enjoyed this, or better still, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your listening platform. Us small independent creators need as much help as we can get at the moment. My next interview is now lined up, and I think it will be equally fascinating. So I'll see you again next week. Until then, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorsStation.co.uk.